Yeah, thanks for that intro, and it's interesting that what Tilo is doing, because with behind seeing data as a graph, I think is very powerful, and you can apply that to many things. And hopefully today I can show you a little bit how I use that idea in my own field, which is football. So who am I? I'm Louis. This is my website. I'm working for a company called OneFootball here in Berlin. I'm wearing two hats. I'm the principal machine learning engineer there, and what I'm going to talk about today falls in that sort of work. And I'm also the tech lead for an NFT project more recently, and there I'm building essentially like a full stack blockchain team and building web apps. So it's something quite different away from data, and it has I transitioned like a few months ago. And but yeah, today is going to be about natural language processing and the work that I was doing for in that space. And on my blog, I blog about like code data. I haven't blogged in a while, but yeah, if you're curious, you can check it out. So the agenda for today is first a little intro to OneFootball. I will keep it only to the relevant parts for the rest of the talk, and also when data science meets business, right? Because that's the kind of the goal of this series, and you will see. I will try to explain to give a concrete example of data science applied to football and news, and I will show lastly like how basically the Nlp solution I built, which is using graphs. So it's quite relevant to this crowd, I guess. And so yeah, like I think that data science is quite broad, but like I see it as really machine learning product, basically, or machine learning solutions. So in this example, I will show you like how I developed and deployed a machine learning solution to a business problem, and this is this is what I think is the most exciting about this field, basically. So there's a bunch of references. So I can circulate the slides later if you want, but they're all in there. And so let's start with the introduction to OneFootball. So OneFootball is a company from Berlin. It's been around for 14 years, so it's not so much a startup anymore. We're like a bit more than 300 people now, but it's it's a digital company from Berlin that is a football platform. So we have we serve 15 million MAUs on both the website and mobile app, native apps. And we have football news, football scores for games, live streaming of games. So a little bit similar to DAZN, another Berlin company. It's mobile first and 24/7. It's not just tech, and that's kind of relevant to the rest of this talk, because not only we have this technical platform where we have an app about football, but we also have a newsroom of football journalists that offer some of the football news, and they they interact with the text data, they write some of that, and they also have to kind of review some of the incoming football news that we get in our news stream in the platform. And we also have another similar team, which is not part of the tech side, which is the studios team, where we have big footprint on YouTube with channels quite big in Germany and Italy, where we do video production, and we have like a full studio. So that's just to show you sort of that a company, of course, it's always more than just the tech, but relevant to this problem is that you have football journalists at some point who have to do something with text data, and you will see what later. One last point that's relevant to today is that we're stronger together. So what we mean by this is that we are building a football platform for the football ecosystem. So all the football clubs that you see on the slides are investors in OneFootball. They're shareholders into OneFootball, and so we are trying to build the football platform for them and to be a nicer partner than what Google and Facebook can be, right? Because all those platforms, all those clubs are on YouTube, of course, they are on Google News. And so why, as a company from Berlin, would you go and try to compete with Google News and with YouTube? Well, there is a better way. You can, give better rev shares to those clubs. You can give them better data about their fans. You can create a better experience. So that's sort of the idea. And one example, which is relevant to what I'm going to talk later, is that on our platform, on our news stream, we get news from these partners, not only the clubs actually, but what you're seeing on the right side is an official news from Manchester City, which was streamed from their basically WordPress website, right, or their own system into our platform, and it comes native in the app, and it goes through a few services, including one of mine, which I will present. So that's it for OneFootball. So now let's talk about when data science meets business, or tries to, at least, I guess. So I will start with a comparative case study between OneFootball and New York Times. So you might not all know OneFootball, but probably you all know New York Times. And I had the privilege to meet Chris Wiggins, who is the head of data science at New York Times. I had the privilege to meet him at EMNLP 2020. It's a conference in NLP. But the good thing with COVID is that a lot of those conferences were happening online, and so you get privileged to meet these kind of people without having to fly in and whatever. And he has some really interesting talks on YouTube about how he thinks about data science and how he structured data science at New York Times. I really encourage you to check this one out. And so when he explains about data science at New York Times, he talks about a data-driven business, right? New York Times initially is known for their curation of news, and they also are known, if you use their subscription, you will notice their recommendation algos, right? And so they did a lot of data science, a lot of machine learning went into that. And what he was saying is that those recommenders freed up a lot of time for the journalists to write top stories and cover breaking news, right? And what was key for them was the pivot from advertising to subscription, right? Because now they have a lot of subscribed users, and they have an abundance of data. They use that for the recommendations. You have the flywheel that a lot of data businesses are talking about. And interestingly, when it comes to tagging articles, they do everything by hand, right? They have a team of ontologists that are called librarians, and they are sort of the caution of New York Times. They've been there forever. This ontology has evolved, and these people tag every single piece. And why? Because if you look on the right, NYT has 250 pieces per day, right? In one language, in English. And so you can literally sit and tag every single piece. When you look at OneFootball, we have 4,000 articles per day coming from these different sources that I mentioned, clubs, our own newsroom, but also blogs. And we are not in one language. We are in 8+ languages, right? So French, German, Portuguese, Brazilian Portuguese, Italian, etc., etc. So, and instead of having just one source, we have 500 of those, right? And instead of being able to do 100% of manual tagging, you are left with being able to do less than 10% manual tagging, right? Or and we are shooting between 5 and 8% manual tagging, right? Because you have this stream of news, and if someone from the newsroom had to sit down and tag every single article, it will eat up their day, right? Because every time you refresh, you have two or three new articles. So that's an interesting difference. When you come back to New York Times, they have machine learning models across the board. They do topic modeling. They do something called reader scope. I included a reference there. So they use topic modeling to sell B2B things, because based on what you read, they can sort of get a really clear picture of the user profile. They do churn prediction. They do a recommender system with reinforcement learning, things like that. They use natural language processing for text CAD and text classification and semi-supervised topic models, part of their recommender system. But like I was saying before, when I asked him, do you do any of this automated tagging? And he was like, oh, no, why are you doing that? You should, try to spend your time more wisely, right? So before going into why we're doing some NLP at OneFootball, I wanted to give you a glimpse into this Nlp Industry Survey to kind of catch up everyone about the basics of NLP. This was done by Ben Lorica and my friend Paco Nathan, and it's really, every year it comes out, and it's the industry standard about NLP. The one for this year came out in September, so it's quite fresh still. So let's first dive into what are the big NLP use cases. The winners, the big winners for everyone, the ones that are mature right now are document classification and name entity recognition. So we're doing something along those lines, actually. The underdog is something called entity linking and knowledge graphs. And this is also part of what I'm using. And the two that are really on the rise are question answering and natural language generation. In there, you're using some of the bigger language models that came out. You might have heard of GPT-3 and things like that. So with models like that, you can generate text of a much better quality than it used to be. And then you can start, molding that into use cases like question answering, because you can now answer free text answers to questions from users and things like that. In terms of NLP solutions, when the respondents of that survey say that what matters is always accuracy and scalability. So you want things that are easy to like plug and play, but they need to be accurate enough, right? And a lot of the times, some of the off-the-shelf models need further tuning and things like this. What's really interesting is to see that 83% of the respondents have used Nlp Cloud Services. So NLP is not something that you need to build from scratch, in your garage. Now you can use AWS, Google, and they have like very strong NLP capabilities. You will have two issues though, and those issues will be tuning for your use case, because those are pre-trained models. And also cost, right? Because then they charge you per prediction. And so if you have a stream of 4,000 articles per day, then it becomes really not so cost efficient. So then what is left in terms of NLP solutions? Well, you build your own using open source building blocks. And there, you have great stuff like Hugging Face and Spacey. Spacey, is from this company called Explosion AI, which is out of Berlin, which is, really cool library, and those two libraries form the bedrock of open source solutions for NLP now. And so when you're looking at data, how do you get your data set for NLP? That survey also does a great job of showing the differences between mature teams and not so mature teams. So here I try to render that into this radar graph, but I've also tweeted that graph, so if you want it in a bigger thing. But basically what's really interesting is that you will see that exploring teams in red go for pre-trained models, right? You download GPT-3 or you download like a smaller model and you apply it to your thing. And then maybe it gives you like Pareto kind of accuracy. It gives you 80-20, you're kind of happy. They also use a lot of open source data sets, right? You go on Kaggle, you go on Google data sets, you use like, papers and you use that for your own model. But then as the team matures, so if it goes towards orange and green, you will see that actually the most mature teams, they internalize labeling of data, because then you realize that using a labeling tool is core to your NLP solution, and you start generating your own data set by labeling your, by first of all, designing your task, labeling your own data, and controlling everything from A to Z there. Also, the other interesting point about mature teams is that you try to bake like feedback loops into your product so that it generates automatically your data. And so, you will see how I try to abuse a little bit these two tricks in my solution. So that's sort of, a bird's eye view of NLP in 2021, 2022. And so this I will skip. So what's our use case at OneFootball? So as I mentioned, we have this stream of 4,000 articles, and what you see on the left here is 3 years of weekly count of articles from this stream, and you've seen that this stream has been growing, right, in all the languages, and it's not quite exponential growth, right, but it's a pretty big growth, right? It's those articles keep on coming, right, and there are more and more every day. We're launching new languages from time to time. So we launched Dutch and Indonesian recently, so there are more and more sources, more and more languages. It's more and more articles. So how do you do to keep up with, with that? And more importantly, text data is unstructured data. So how do you turn that into structured data that you can use in your user experience? How can you use that in your product? Well, the answer is like, if you take an example of such a story that was from yesterday, you have Mbappe and Haaland, how Real Madrid starting 11 is going to look like in 2022, 2023. So this is a story about some players, right? You have Mbappe and Haaland. You have a club, which is Real Madrid, and probably you have some implied clubs in there, which are PSG and Dortmund, I guess. You have maybe a match because there was PSG Real just a couple of days ago. It might be about transfers. It might be about like a couple of things. So you have these different layers that I put here, and those. So you turn this unstructured data, which is a football article, into structured data in layers. And so first you will look at entities, competition, team, players, matches. Then you will look at sort of wider things, entities that are not football related, like COVID-19, FIFA 21, Florentino Perez, with like a VIP of football, but not a player, right? And then you can go a bit further with looking at topics, right? So what is a transfer piece? Is this a women football piece? Is this an interview and things like that? So that's our use case, and we're trying to make sense of that unstructured data, basically, just like that. So then comes the question, should we buy this or should we build it, right? And if you look at the market, the best alternative is a company called Primary AI out of the US. It's a very interesting startup that came out of the DoD of the US, and they've been doing really cool NLP stuff for the DoD, for defense. And basically what you get is you get a stream of news, like they hook up LexisNexis into their platform. So they have a big stream of generic news, not football specific. And then you can search for anything in their search bar. And you will find PSG related news with entities that are tagged, right? So players, teams, and countries in this case, right? So actually it sort of covers a lot of what I was talking about just before. The problem is that this is really generic to everything. You could type in here Ukraine, and you will get the same kind of level of breakdown. So that's great because it gives you like the a tool, and that's why the DoD of the US is very interested, or like financial applications are very interested. But for us as a football platform, we want to own the structure of the data around the text, right? We want to own the graph essentially behind it. We want to be in control and say, look, right now there's COVID happening. We want to add COVID to our graph so that now we can relate articles that are about COVID, right? So in the end, I decided, okay, we don't go with them, and we built, right? So now we are in our last part. I'm going to show you a little, like really quickly, how I built this NLP solution, and no graphs were harmed in the making of this model, I can assure you. So first a meme, okay? So if you look on the right, like a lot of people around NLP will talk about transformers, about like throwing deep learning at problems and things like this. What I think is a bit smarter is to go back, basically, to go into unsupervised models, to go into regex, and to even maybe go as far as to go with rules. Because the cool thing with these things is that you can explain them to your stakeholders. In my case, the newsroom editors, or the product managers, and yeah. So there are a couple of mistakes to avoid, and the first one is that you should not fall in the trap of writing too many regexes, because the rule of regex is regrets. Then you should not use machine learning, meaning supervised learning, when combined handcrafted rules suffice, right? Because sometimes they do, and it's great. You can get great accuracy by writing a couple of backend rules, and it's fine. And you can be a data scientist and writing those rules as well. It's it's no shame. The third mistake is that if you can use unsupervised learning, do, right? You should not think that unsupervised learning is sort of somewhat inferior to supervised learning. And if you end up casting a problem that could be solved as unsupervised learning as a supervised learning problem, then you create for yourself a big problem, which is you need to collect a data set, and then you need to update that data set whenever you want to retrain your model, right? So whenever a new event happens, a new football event happens, you need to recollect your data set and retrain your model. Whereas with unsupervised learning, maybe your problem was already solved. And then you have more this deep learning craze, hype issues where, don't default to transformers when a simpler deep learning model suffice, especially for NLP. Things like CNN, RNNs have been around for 5-6 years, and they work. Of course, you can find better, but especially in English, for example, they already work quite well. And so, maybe for your problem, it's enough. And yeah, of course, defaulting to transformers and then realizing at the last minute that actually if you spin that up on your cloud, it's gonna eat up all your credit in 2 hours, right? And yeah, because it's costly and it needs like big inference machines. So here's the output of the system. Based on all like sort of these mistakes to avoid, I crafted my own system which uses combinations of unsupervised learning, knowledge graphs, semi-supervised learning with like input from your subject matter experts, in my case being newsroom editors. And here you see a QA UI that I built on top of the model with the article that I showed before, Mbappe versus Haaland. You see the final tags, which are Haaland and his club, Mbappe and his club, and Real Madrid, which is the club that we are talking about. You see that it's the model has inferred a graph which connects all those entities, and I will walk you through them because those are OneFootball IDs. But basically, you have Haaland as a player, who is this player with ID 18 something. He plays for Dortmund, which is this team. This Dortmund team plays in competition 5, which is Champions League, which is also the competition in which Real Madrid plays, and it's also a competition in which PSG plays, and Kylian Mbappe plays in PSG. So this is what the model has understood from this article, and it gives you this ranked list of entities and based on importance and things like this. Okay, then you can feed that to further backend systems, and then you can start building an experience around your text data actually. Okay, so can I? Oh, did I break it? Nice. So yeah, just to give you a really rough intuition behind the model, I'm combining a lot of different things, but first I do NER, one of the big use cases I was talking about, so entity recognition. After that, I do what's called entity linking. So entity linking is different from entity deduplication that Tilo does, but like it's also about entities, and it's about linking them, resolving them against, not against like themselves or like another version of themselves. It's about resolving them against the main, or like the main page of that entity. Think like Kylian Mbappe. The main page of Kylian Mbappe might be Kylian Mbappe on Wikipedia, right? That's sort of the representation of Kylian Mbappe in the World Wide Web, and we want to link back the mention of Kylian Mbappe in that article to Kylian Mbappe on Wikipedia, right? And then after that, I poured all that into what I call a focal point ranker, which basically helps, which sorts things and try to give an understanding of what is important in the article based on the graph that was built, what is important, and then you keep only the most important things. So, for example, what you don't see in this example is that probably a lot of the other players that were mentioned in the article are also tagged, but you don't want them in the final tags, right? So you need to somehow prune things, and you do that by understanding what is the focal point of the article. And surprise, surprise, a solution in this world is more than just the model. And so this is what the solution looks like. The model is at the middle here. I call this the tagging model, but it's part of a wider solution. And the name of the series was When Data Science Meets Business, right? And so here I try to highlight where actually business meets data science in a way. So those SMEs are my subject matter experts. So that's where you really infuse like semi-supervision into the system. And you see here that editors can go and edit the knowledge graph that we're using. The knowledge graph is based on manual input, but also based on automated input from our relational databases. It's also based on some of the output from the retagging. We also have editors that can edit the topic model we use to classify articles. And then when the news stream comes up, it goes through all these different models, one after the other, and also in parallel a little bit, and then it comes out the other end, and you get tagged articles. And then you can put these articles into the QA web app that you had a glimpse of above, where the data scientists can go and check the results and understand what's going on. And most importantly, we talked about how do you generate data. There were 2 tricks. you need to label, and you need to bake into your product feedback loop so that you can generate data automatically. And this is what we do here. So there is a separate UI from the QA web app, which is called the retagging UI, where the newsroom editor monitors the stream and can retag things if the tags were wrong. And we pick up those retags with event tracking, and those flow into the data warehouse, and then basically they end up flowing into the knowledge graph again, and we can learn weights and learn things based on that feedback, which allows you to scale, like you saw with the volume of articles, that you sort of leave its own life, and it's just works. So what was the impact? That's my last slide. This is like a really rough query that I ran yesterday on the data warehouse, but this gives you like the weekly retagging rates for 1 year, broken down by language. And you see that it's well below 10% most of the times. And my goal was like, somewhere around 5%. But one of the sad truths of real data science, and when I say real data science is what I mean, something that is applicable and where you can actually bring to the business, not something on Kaggle where you have a leaderboard with a metric. The problem with the real data science is sometimes the metric is unclear because you just need business to run, right? You need those articles to be tagged. If they are not so good, you don't mind. You need just to understand what is your metric, and actually that exercise of defining the metric per se at first was also like a big part of that project that I didn't really touch upon. And so we ended up on this retagging rate because I think for us it makes sense to think about what would the human have to do if the model is very bad, right? If the model is very bad, then the human has to retag every single article, right? So we want to think New York Times, they retag 100%, right? We want to bring that down from 100% to here 5% or like 5, 8, 10%, right? And we're happy with that because we have such a big volume. So overall, it's not that much retags, and then we can sort of stop the project here and leave its own life. And if we thought that somehow now 5% is not good enough, we can go through another cycle, invest a bit more, tweak the model, maybe add a couple of more steps and reduce that to 3% or something, right? Or if my French colleagues from the French newsroom become really unhappy with 10%, then maybe I need to go back to work. But yeah, that's about it for me. Thanks a lot. And yeah, if you have questions, I can take them now, I guess, or maybe
one question.
One or two questions. But yeah, otherwise, thanks a lot for your attention. Yeah.
So the final value of the categories that you assign is that me as a consumer of the football news, I read the article, I see all the categories, and click on them, and then it gives you related articles.
Yes, so that would be one path. But the most important thing that I didn't mention, I guess, is that you as a football fan, you would first select which entities you want to follow. Mm-hmm. If you're a fan of Neymar and PSG, you follow Neymar and PSG, and based on that, we build your feed, basically. Right? Yeah.
And it's the same idea. It's just a group, right?
Sorry?
It's the same idea. It's a group, right?
Yeah. So I mentioned. Yeah. So I mentioned that Google is of course like doing a lot of that. Google is doing football scores. Google is doing news, of course, with also understanding entities somewhat. You have this, when you do entity, like it's called entity-oriented search. So when you look for Kylian Mbappé, you will see like the Wikipedia page pop up on the right side. So Google has somewhat a deep understanding of what's going on, but Google is not tailored to football, right? So then you don't have some of those deeper integrations that are in Google. They might come at some point.
Oh, yeah, we'll focus on your specific domain.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right?
Yes. Yeah. So
what about the idea of commercialization?
Well,
scaling up, right?
Yeah, so I mean, you might answer your own question if you think about the deeper integration on the football domain. What is available when you're doing pure football that is not available when you're Google? Well, you can do advertisement like Google, but you can also do sports betting, for example, which is not available on Google, right? So when you're talking football in a football article about a game that's happening tomorrow, might be a good place to upsell a bet, right, with a betting partner, and then you do basically B2B sales, right? And so yeah, that's one of the applications. You can do You can go beyond that with, like, we have other monetization ways. So because we are this like cohesive platform, we also do streaming of games. We also do, so we also have rights for some games. So if you're reading about a certain game that's happening tomorrow, we pick that up, and then tomorrow we try to sell you what's called OTT streaming, so over the top streaming. So you're gonna buy a game for €3 and be able to watch it on your device. And so this way we also monetize. We are like we also monetize with more direct to consumer verticals, and that's where also NFT comes up and all of that. So yeah. We can work with Google. Well, the goal is the goal is not so much to work with them. The goal is to replace them, basically, right? Because Google doesn't give as much data and revenue to the clubs. Okay, so they don't work for the clubs, right? And in our case, so for example, if you go on YouTube, clubs post their football match highlights on YouTube, and they get maybe some revenue from that, but like mostly they just push that into a void, and that's it. Whereas they can put the same highlights on OneFootball, and in that sense, we're competing with Google, because then we give you reports about which users watch those highlights, and we can monetize those highlights better, give the rev share to the clubs and stuff like that, right? So yeah, the idea is not to work with Google so much.